think we're recording. We're on a new platform, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Dave Kopacz. This is Chris Smith. I'm a psychiatrist. I'm doing telepsychiatry now. I've recently changed jobs. I'm an author, artist, yoga instructor, meditation instructor, and friend of Chris Smith.
And what's the name of this podcast?
I always forget. Becoming a True Human.
Becoming a True Human.
Yeah.
Yeah, welcome everyone. Thank you for listening. We always appreciate the feedback that we hear from you. I'm Chris Smith. I am a meditation teacher, family counselor, and author, and podcaster.
Oh yeah, you are. You're good at it.
I don't know.
I always look forward to these.
Yeah, me too.
Mhm.
Me too.
Yeah.
Well, can we just dive in?
Have you thought about writing a book called Be a Good Podcast?
No, I haven't. But maybe I should write that book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you got Be a Good Story already.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
Well, speaking of stories, my friend, I have a story at the top of our time, and then we'll just see what unfolds from there. So this week, actually, I was spending some time writing, and one of the things that was coming up for me was this idea of how illness, at least for me, can keep me at home and can keep me isolated. And during these moments, sometimes I find that I can begin to sort of build these inner spaces where I can imagine life without sickness, without ulcerative colitis, places where I can sort of step out of my room. And instead of living in this world of pain or illness or fatigue, I can sort of find these small refuges of solace. And what I find that these are often areas of creativity, imagination, and dare I say, Dave, dreaming. And this inner world often, for me, can become a superpower of sorts, offering brief sanctuaries, if you will, of chronic illness. And so I was writing about these, and one of the things that kept coming up for me as I was wrapped under my Winnie the Pooh blanket is I began thinking about how I might begin creating workshops, giving talks to persons that live with the same disease that I have. And maybe even I'd expand the lens to just chronic illness. And so this is an area that I really began to kind of think about during these moments when I felt like I was able to do that, when I was sort of confined to bed. And so part of it is like I was thinking about mindfulness practices, which we're going to practice one today. I was thinking of like grounding techniques. I was thinking how to create safe places where persons can support one another emotionally, in terms of just some of the challenges of living with a chronic illness. And so I began outlining this in my mind. And at some point, I had this opportunity. A friend of mine said, hey, it would be interesting if you would, create a workshop. At first I thought a retreat, and I thought, no, maybe a workshop for persons
Like how long of a workshop?
Well, the first one actually was about 6 hours.
Yeah.
And I had it all outlined. Again, I had a lot of time in my bed thinking about this, Dave. And so anyway, I drafted a proposal. I created a summary of it. I came up with this title. And again, this was offered in a metropolitan area. And the invitation, this went out to thousands of people. And the title that came up for me was Chronic Illness Meets Love. Probably not the best title, but I think
it's great. I mean, that's a great title. Anyone who's had chronic illness understands the need for love.
Well, I really felt that love and self-compassion often softens the hard edges of pain, and and in terms of what we feel, in terms of the unpredictability of illness. So here's the great catch. Nobody signed up.
Nobody?
Nobody. Not one person.
Huh.
So then it still continued, Dave. The story continued. Several months after that, there was a second.
Did you send that to me? Did I sign up for it?
No, you didn't.
No.
The second workshop, I thought, oh, I've got a better chance. This one, I thought, oh, this was in a more rural setting. And I thought, okay, this is a place where typically maybe the medically underserved, or where persons with chronic illness maybe experience deeper isolation or maybe limited access to healthcare resources. And I thought, okay, this is another great opportunity. I changed the title, Dave. This time I thought, okay, I'm going to stay away from that four-lettered word, love, and I just called it Mindfulness Meets Chronic Illness. In addition, I then scaled back the time to 2 hours, thinking that, the shorter time, people are juggling their symptoms and work and family. And I thought, okay, so guess what happened?
What happened?
Nobody signed up.
Again?
I felt like such a loser, Dave. I had this vision was so clear in my mind. It's like I believed in it. I thought there is something here. So time went on. My illness kind of took me away from this work for a number of months. But there was a third time. And the third time was that I decided to switch to more of a virtual platform. And I thought, well, that would help remove some of the barriers for people that have chronic illness. For many people, it's hard to travel. So I advertised it through LinkedIn. Maybe you missed that one, Dave. And this time I decided to call it, again, something different. I thought, why not be more upbeat and positive? So I called it Chronic Health. And I scaled, instead of 2 hours, I thought, okay, just 1 hour. Guess what?
Nobody came.
One person showed up, my friend.
Yeah.
And it was a wonderful conversation. I didn't use any of the curriculum because it just, it was just not right. And so again, it was a wonderful conversation. And after that, I just kind of let this idea just float out there. I will say I was a little disappointed and felt like this is a good idea. I really feel that, I just felt like it still has a place. And then more and more months went by. And then out of the blue, I had a telephone call. And the telephone call was a friend of mine and says, you know what, we're doing these group medical visits and we're looking with someone who has a mindfulness background. And we're doing these group medical visits. It's sort of a collaboration between a physician and someone like me. There are 6 sessions. They're about 2 hours each. Would you be interested? And I said, darn right, I'm there. Yes.
You have a lot of experience putting those together.
So in reflection, I think when we experience, chronic illness, and we'll expand this a little later. I think there are opportunities for creativity through our imagination and in our own dreaming. It didn't unfold the way that I thought that it would, but it did unfold. And it makes me wonder about this idea, Dave, that I'd like to hear you talk about. Is like, why is it, or what is it about dreams and imagination and creativity that visit us during our most vulnerable moments?
Yeah, one really important thing that I've been thinking the whole time you were talking, Chris, weren't we going to talk about something else today?
Yes. We'll get to that, I think.
Okay, yeah, maybe we will. We might get to it. I couldn't resist that. So in thinking about that, you could see you could say you had 3 failures of these workshops you were putting together, and you kept adjusting them. You didn't tell everybody about the 30-second infomercial version that you then tried, but you were like laying the groundwork for something. Sometimes in sort of new age circles, they talk about this idea of like, if you build it, they will come. And so you kept building it and they didn't come, and you built a little bit more and they didn't come. And but eventually, somebody, you were putting it out into the world, and somebody recognized that and invited you to do what you were trying to do. So there's that interesting point of, you'd said something, a phrase when we were kind of talking about this earlier, of the sanctuary of creativity and imagination, or what was your sentence that you said?
Let me think. I think brief sanctuaries of creativity and imagination. Creativity and imagination offers brief sanctuaries from chronic illness.
Yeah. So using creativity and imagination requires a space, requires the sanctuary. So we could look at it that the creativity and imagination creates the sanctuary, or we could look at it that the sanctuary creates the void or the opening where creativity and imagination can fill that void. And so one of the things I was thinking about and remembering was, in Becoming Medicine, I really got interested in the book Becoming Medicine. I really got interested in the idea of the guhā, Guha, which is a Sanskrit word that means cave of the heart. And working with Joseph Rael, then we talked a lot about the cave and what is the cave and what's the function of the cave, and why do holy people go off to caves to try to meditate and to, find themselves or connect to the divine. And the idea of the guhā is that there's a cave of the heart, that within the heart, if you look deep enough, there's a space, and you go into that space, and it's an opening and an emptiness. And within that opening and emptiness, it becomes filled with your inner self, like the place where the inner self and the divine meet could be thought of as that guhā, or the cave of the heart. The word guru has that same root, gu meaning darkness, and ru, sometimes they'll think about like a teacher, or the teacher who leads you out of the darkness. And I thought about the guhā as kind of like having your own inner guru. It's the place that you go to meet your inner guru. And I thought a lot about that, the requirement of an empty space in order to be filled, that you have to empty yourself out. There's like a Christian Greek term of kenosis or something.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Right. Of this sort of like, emptying out or finding something within the darkness. So, I think about that, of chronic illness throws us back upon ourselves. Like the book that I may write at some point, if I ever come out of this, if I ever find myself, is called Being Lost in the Wilderness of the Body. And it felt like the illness was just, my mind didn't work as well. I just could kind of lay there. And sometimes, have dreams, have, kind of sleeping dreams, or have kind of the waking dreams where you're thinking about some sort of insight or inspiration. And I'll say one more thing with this, if I can come back to it. I might have lost it for now. So go ahead and say something, Chris, and I'll come back to this. Thank you. You reminded me. Asklepios, or Asklepios, the idea of incubation. So in the ancient Greek temples, incubation was you'd go down into the darkness, the sanctuary underneath the temple, and you'd just lie still in a process they used to call incubation. You would just lie there and you'd dream. You'd have a dream about the god Asklepios, or the dream about the dogs, temple dogs, or the temple snakes that were part of the healing experience there. But the way that healing came was by kind of surrendering and going down into this darkness and just waiting for something to come to you instead of trying to get rid of the darkness.
It reminds me a number of years ago, and I'm not going to remember this accurately, so I just want to apologize. But I was in Greece, and we were visiting.
The country or the musical?
Yeah, the country.
Oh, okay.
And we saw, if my memory is serving, one of these temples. And what I remember is that persons who were coming for healing would go and actually lie down, and there would be herbs, but then there would be some of the persons who were sort of in the top who would be whispering or singing or saying things as they slept. This idea of maybe with the space that the persons who were laying down that were creating by just resting and being. I think this idea of taking in, again, some of this wisdom or healing that was being offered.
Mhm.
One of the things that we talked about, Dave, is, and I don't want to just center this just on chronic illness, because I think one of the things that we talked about before recording today is how this also may have a broader implication. Maybe the chronic illness is a microcosm of a macrocosm. And so this is kind of talking about, for some persons in this time that we're living in, this culture that we're living in, that it can be a very challenging time. You and I both talked about our challenges with working, unfortunately, with healthcare as it is as a system. And we've talked about, again, the struggle of just finding help or even getting medication that's appropriate. And so what place is it possible to dream, to have imagination, to be creative in a time, a cultural context, a societal context? How do we do that? Or what are ways that we do that? It feels to me like another layer, a broader layer of this idea that we're working with today.
Yeah. So, like finding dreams and visions. We've talked before about hope on podcasts, and you're writing a book on hope opens doors. So, how do you find hope in the darkness? That's a nice Rebecca Solnit book. And how do you find this creativity and imagination and that sanctuary? You had implied something that our time that we're living in is like chronic illness. It's like living in a chronic illness where things don't come together, things seem not right, things are unwell. We are struggling to get better, and yet we feel like things keep happening that throw us back upon ourselves or make it difficult to get better, difficult to reach that healing. So it reminds me almost of like a Taoist, kind of aphorism or maxim of when the time is wrong in society, you don't try to move ahead in society. That's when the sage would retreat into the forest, into nature, into themselves. And when the time is right in society, that's when the sage would move into society. But the sage and society both had to be in the right place for success to happen. Because if you push when you're getting pushed back on and you push against it, you have failure. When the time is beckoning and begging for you to step in, and yet you're retreated and avoid stepping in, that's also a kind of failure. So the two types of success are stepping into society when the situations support your success, and stepping into yourself when the situations in society don't support that, or when the time to cultivate yourself is right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean,
You can probably say it in a shorter way than I can.
You remind me of, again, some of from the Christian tradition, the desert fathers and mothers during the time of the Roman Empire, when Christianity was really becoming more of an empire religion, that a number of persons, again, who we called the desert fathers and mothers, left society and moved to the desert, sort of these, again, these refuges of space. and refuges of stillness. And through their, meditation and, again, really they began creating kind of a different way of living with the world as it was. And so you're reminding me a little bit of that piece.
Yeah.
So we have to go to the woods or desert is kind of what you're saying right now.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, that we're going to cut this podcast short. Chris and I are signing off from society.
This is our
from
last
civilization.
one.
We're not even going to finish the podcast.
We're going to go.
There's a van right idling outside waiting to take us off into the wilderness.
And this also is true with, you talked about Taoism. So Lao Tzu, who wrote the Tao Te Ching, which is a 2,500-year-old sort of text. It's sort of philosophy and kind of like a way of going about one's life. He too, the legend has it, again, was working in administrative work in China. And again, the time for him became such where he also left and went into the wilderness. But before he went into the wilderness, the gatekeeper begged him to write out sort of his wisdom. He was known to be a wise person. And so that then became the Tao Te Ching. So another example.
Yeah, interesting story. Yeah. So how is our time like a chronic illness, and how does our understanding of chronic illness sort of inform how to live in this time? How do we find creativity and imagination and create sanctuaries of hope in this time that can be so hopeless and feel so just all-encompassing?
So one of the things, again, just based on this story that I shared and one that I'm writing about, which was instructive for me afterwards, which is I had a really particular vision of what I thought needed to happen, and I followed it. And there were a lot more failures. It did not go the way that I thought it would, and I kind of feel like that is often the case, that many of us may have ideas of how the world should be or how our lives should be, how our health should be, and doesn't always align with our own perspectives. So I think that's one point that comes up for me. I think the other thing, like you were talking about, is just sort of to persist. I mean, if one really feels it in their heart, and just to see where it goes. I also think there's this other piece. I was fortunate in that something did happen where I was able to kind of bring, but that doesn't always happen. And I think of Rebecca Solznick, with some of that. It doesn't always happen on our watch or our time. So that's another piece.
Yeah. Would you say there's something that you just must do?
I mean, I felt that way. I felt like I really wanted to be able to offer what I was learning from my illness to people that have it. That was kind of a must for me.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever think of something like 3 musts?
Is that a perfume or a cologne?
No, I'm trying to get you back to that Albert Ellis quote. That was cute. Those were cues. I was trying to set up the punchline.
Go ahead, my friend.
You didn't take the bait.
No,
it's you. It's something that you read that Albert Ellis, the founder of rational emotive therapy, what was it? How he said it? Like there's 3 musts that people feel should be there. That
I must do well.
I must do well. You must treat me well, and life must be easy.
Yeah.
So what did he say? What do you do with those musts? You basically understand them, and you deconstruct them, and you say, this is a cognitive belief system. Maybe we could even say a cognitive distortion that I'm imposing upon my life and reality, that I must do well or else, I'm a failure or whatever. And you must treat me well or else something is wrong with our relationship and the world. And that life must be easy. And if it's not, then, there's something that's wrong. So these would be fundamental distortions that instead we could say, I don't have to do well. I'll do however I do. And sometimes not doing well, like your workshops with no participants, led the way to you actually, having the successful workshop. And that if you feel mistreated, you can become bitter. Like the healthcare system doesn't treat you well. We talk about that sometimes. And so instead of saying the healthcare system should treat us well and getting embittered, we can say, well, there's no rule that we have to be treated well. Sometimes in life that just happens, so let's not get stuck in it, and let's just move on. It doesn't mean being a punching bag or a masochist or something, but not to get too all bent out of shape about it. And that life must be easy. That's a really tough one. Life must be easy. And then we think about it, sometimes I'll contextualize and I'll think, what was life like in the 1960s, with all that kind of stuff going on? And it must have felt really like energizing, but there was a lot of bad stuff that was happening then too. Or what was life like during World War II, depending on where you were in the world? What was life like during the Black Plague? What was life like during these different times? And then I think, wow, I've got it so easy compared to the struggles that people have had at different times in history.
I'm just reflecting as you're going through Albert Ellis, you're creating a space for us. And that space allows us, to kind of maybe see from a different perspective. So I'm just noticing that.
Yeah. Reminds me a little bit like the Four Noble Truths. Albert Ellis's three musts are a little bit, like the Four Noble Truths, that life is suffering. If you believe life is suffering, then you're not going to get upset when you have suffering in your life. You're going to see the suffering as something that you can use as a way of your education. Like when Joseph Rael told me, you've got cancer because you're still in training. And so then I was like, what am I in training for? I don't remember signing up for this.
Have you figured out that question or thought about that question or reflected on it?
Yeah, I think the whole teleological purpose of my illness was leading up to this moment in the podcast, Chris.
And?
And then this moment.
Nice.
Yeah. So welcome to Becoming a True Human. I'm Dave Kopacz, and this is Chris Smith. And our topic today is looking forward and looking back. Chris, what do you think about that topic, which was one of our possible topics for today?
Well, let's talk about let's start a little bit with just looking back. And Dave, what are some of your thoughts with that?
Well, I don't know. Is this like our 14th episode?
I think so.
Yeah. So we put together these podcasts. I don't know. I don't remember why. We like talking. We like making jokes. We both had chronic illness. We feel better when we talk and laugh. So, hopefully that's something that helps other people. We like to think about things. I don't know. I'm pretty happy with the way the podcast has kind of shaped up and come together. We have a nice kind of balance of flexibility without chaos and rigidity without structure. The other way around, structure without rigidity.
There we go.
Right. So it's fun. I like doing it. I look forward to it. The topics seem to kind of come together. We sort of throw these topics around in between times, and often they sort of dovetail and kind of coalesce into something. It's kind of like we're creating a space through the podcast that hopefully will allow some kind of imagination and creativity to come in. It's kind of a sanctuary. So maybe looking forward, we're going to rename the podcast Creating Sanctuaries of Hope and Creativity in Contemporary Life.
Wow, that's pretty good.
How about you, looking backward, looking forward?
I think for me, two things. One is that I always look forward to getting together with you. I don't know why, but I mean, I enjoy. I mean, I think one of among many of the favorite things is we usually spend about an hour before we do one of these just talking and catching up. So I've really enjoyed that connection. I also enjoy just the spontaneity that we have in these podcast, and yeah, just something I look forward to. And like you say, I think one of the things that I really appreciate is just some of the feedback that we get from those two or three people that listen out there. And
yeah, Bob, Jane, thanks. We appreciate it. Right.
That to me is great because it really, I don't know, it just feels that community, a sense of connection. And so I've really, really appreciated that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been really fun. And we've kind of talked about what are we going to do going forward, because we keep talking about interviews of like trying to have guests on, and it's just felt like, for me, I felt like I'm still processing a lot of the illness experience. We moved from Seattle to Madison, Wisconsin. That's taken up a big chunk of this last year. And we're getting a feel for what this is like with the podcast. We had one guest on, Jonathan McFarland. That was a great episode.
Fun.
Yeah, that was really fun. Jonathan's really easy to talk to, and he's always got tons of ideas. So, and then, we're also going to talk about this. Remember the Healers Council?
Oh yeah, I thought about that because we met last week at your house.
Yeah,
I just think some of the listeners would be interested in just that healers circle and just sort of what's going on. I mean, not everyone has access to that. So would you?
Yeah.
You're the one that initiated it. Would you mind speaking to it?
Sure. I mean, partly I'm doing telepsychiatry now, and so I'm pretty isolated, not having much human contact other than through the video mediated. And I really don't have any contact with other colleagues through this other than through like Teams chats back and forth. So moving here to Madison, one of the reasons it appealed to me, my wife, she was happy because her sister is here and we've got family, and it's also, we've got family in Minnesota and Illinois, and Wisconsin's kind of in the middle. But one of the things for me was Madison is really a place where whole health was born. With Adam Reinfleisch and his whole team with University of Wisconsin, they had the contract with VA for creating and implementing whole health.
Would you mind just explaining what whole health is?
Whole health is? Sure. Whole health is the VA's model of holistic healing. It's self-care, things that people can do on their own. It looks at your body, your surroundings, personal development, food and drink, sleep and rest, relationships, spirit and soul, and the power of the mind, and kind of bringing all these together. The circle that has me, or I also like to say, if you flip me upside down, it has we in the center. So me and we are in the center of this. It's really kind of a way, the VA's way of becoming a true human, we could say.
And it also, I think one of the key components of whole health is this aspect of one's aspiration. What gives them meaning? What is their mission? And that has played a really important role in whole health. Yeah.
The mission, aspiration, and purpose are mapped. So anyway, so there's a great group of people here in Madison. And Chris, you're not too far away from us here. And so partly, I realized I need to have some human contact if I'm going to make it with this job, for a while. The other thing is, I've had a number of conversations with people over the years who are in whole health about what's going to happen after whole health. What are we going to do like after retirement? The thing that was the best experience for me about whole health wasn't necessarily the philosophical framework, although I like that. It wasn't the courses and materials that we developed. It was the people, all these healers who had been on their own path, and it felt like being part of the X-Men or something. It was like all these mutants who didn't fit into the rest of medicine got to come together and create this, this great experience, this great force of healing for the world. And it's been great within the VA, but I left the VA. You're not with the other company that was the contractor. Carol Bowman retired. Carl Ann, I think, has left the VA. We've got all these different people who we've been working with who are no longer affiliated with the VA system, but still, we realize whole health kind of gave us an identity, a language, a shared common language that we can use to talk about healing in healthcare and beyond.
And so we all gathered at your house.
We all had a council. The reason I called it a healing circle makes it seem like the experience of being in the healing circle is the goal. And I called it a council because I want the first half to be a healing circle, and I want the second half to be a healer's council, which is, what are we all going to do? What's going to come out of this, this gathering? And so I kept thinking, I need to figure it out. Is it going to be a book club? Is it going to be, a larger group, more regional, of bringing up our people together and just having a meeting and having fun? Is it going to be, putting together some type of workshop or something that's outward facing that we're going to do?
I know 3 titles of a workshop that we don't need to use, so that I can contribute.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I think we still could use those. But anyway, you had a great point, Chris. We were sitting next to each other, and you kind of, I think, whispered it at some point. Like I was in incubation sleeping, and you were up above and whispered it, of like, I think the thing that's going to come out of this is the thing that comes out of it from all of us being together. Something like that. So that instead of trying to figure out ahead of time what we're going to do, to see what just organically kind of grows out of it. And sharing our writing is one thing. Julia actually said something to me at the end of the council, that she'd like to come in and talk about the workshops that she's doing. So a place where we can kind of proof or test out some of our topics, things that we're doing. But I'd like it to be, where we go in, but we also go out, and have that come from our gatherings.
And I think one of the things, Dave, that you brought up, which I think our listeners will really be excited about, is that we're thinking about, as we move in the future, is to bring some of these voices to the podcast. And so that is one of our intentions, is to bring some of these wonderful human beings that really have done and contributed in so many wonderful ways to health and well-being, to our podcast, and to interview them and talk with them. And so that's something that we're kind of looking forward to.
Yeah. And so in the next year and maybe coming years, we'll have a tripartite structure to the podcast, perhaps like Freud's id, ego, and superego, or Jung's, collective unconscious, let's say unconscious, ego, and self. But part of the time it'll be Chris, it'll be the Chris and Dave show. So we'll still do our thing. And then, so that'll be one. The next one will be whole health guests, special whole health guests, where we'll talk about this. It'll kind of be an extension of the Healers Council and reflection back on it, of like, what'd you do at the VA, looking forward, looking back, finding the creative space in between the two. And then the third one will be different people that we want to interview to bring onto the show as kind of guest speakers. And these might be people who we haven't necessarily worked with, but people who we've been inspired by their work or their writing. And so this will almost have a little bit more of an interview, like the one with Jonathan McFarland was kind of a template for that. Yeah.
So that's what we have planned for the next years.
Yeah, years, right. If it works, if that model works.
Yeah, yeah. So again, those of you who are listening, again, feel free to give us feedback if there's things that you would like us to do, or topics, or persons that you think would be interested, you'd be interested in being interviewed or have on the podcast. We certainly would welcome all of that feedback.
Yeah, thanks. So, segue back to the creative space.
Yeah, do you feel like a practice would be a nice way to kind of...
Yeah. Do the poem. Let's do the poem.
I was on a retreat last year, and one of the retreatants is a person named Ryan C. Van Wyck. Very nice person. And he wrote this poem in response to a Hafiz poem called Dropping Keys. And he entitled this poem, Hope Renewed, Hope Renewed. And it goes like this. The small man builds cages for everyone he knows. The small man builds cages for everyone he knows, while the sage, who has to duck his head when the moon is low, keeps dropping keys all night long for the beautiful, rowdy prisoners.
I like it. Yeah, it's sort of a take on that, sort of out of Sufism, the story of the guy who's lost his keys and he's trying to get into his house, and his friend comes by and says, what happened? And he says, I lost my keys, and he's crawling around in his hands and feet, and they search every inch of the ground, and eventually a friend says, well, where did you lose your keys? And he said, well, over there. And he said, well, why are we looking here? He said, well, because the light's better under the street light.
It's a great story.
Yeah. And it reminds me too of something with Joseph Rael, where I realized at some point we were both doorways for each other. He's a doorway into this kind of indigenous, healing, mystic, visionary world, and I was a doorway for him into the kind of medical, mainstream kind of world. And that our books together hopefully opened these doors so that people from the medical realm could come in and learn about his realm, and so that the people from his realm, they don't need to learn about the medical stuff. Maybe they do, but it would be a meeting place, a place where two things came together, a confluence, a conference of birds, if we're going to stick with the Sufi references. So practice.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say before we get to
No, I'm glad you said that piece about your book. That's one of the beautiful aspects of your books, is that they bring in that confluence. It's something I've always appreciated, and so glad you made mention of it.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been great working with Joseph. So let's do, I think how to do this. I think we'll combine kind of two different exercises. Throughout some of the books together, we've also created sort of meditations or rituals, practices, ceremonies, whatever you want to call them. And we have one that's kind of the circulating heart, and there's another that's the guhā, or the cave of the heart. And so let's come in through the circulating nature of the heart, and then find in the center of the circle. It's kind of implied. When you go around a circle, you may be walking around this path, but the what holds the circle as a circle and not somebody wandering off or going in a straight line is there's a center of gravity that kind of pulls you in and you sort of orbit it. And you have to intuit the center. You know, the Earth never goes into the sun, but without the sun, the Earth would drift off, you know.
As you're talking, I'm thinking of the picture behind you, which
Ah,
illustrates exactly what you just said.
yeah. So that's the hero's journey diagram that I made for the hero's journey class with the veterans. So yeah, right. There's all the denseness of the words for each of the different steps that Joseph Campbell used to describe the hero's journey. And in the center is this, you know, the structure requires the center, but when you're going around out here, you're like, I'm just lost in the wilderness of the body, you know, or I'm lost in the chaos of our time in this country. And so finding the space or going within or being still or, you know, incubating on an idea, actually not on an idea, incubating on a space where the idea manifests itself. So, okay. So to start with, you know, find a comfortable sort of posture. Sometimes I'll say to have a noble pose if you like doing that, where your head is over your shoulders or over your hips, or just get comfortable. You can lie down however you are most comfortable for this guided meditation. And to start with, I like to use this with medical people as a way of meditating, because medical people have studied the physiological heart. The heart has 4 chambers, kind of like the 4 directions of the medicine wheel. Each chamber has a different function. So the right atrium receives the blood that's at the lowest point of oxygen from the body. It passes it to the right ventricle below it. The right ventricle sends it off to the heart's buddy, the lungs. The lungs reinvigorate, they bring in the oxygen. Well, first, you know, they take off the carbon dioxide and then they bring in the oxygen to the blood. So the blood is replenished and repleted, and that comes into the left atrium. So the left atrium is receiving the most rich oxygenated blood. The right atrium is receiving the most depleted, used up blood. And then from the the left atrium, the rich oxygenated blood, the heart gives that to the left ventricle. The left ventricle shares that with the entire body. So I think of this as a pathway of transformation within the body that's happening all the time. It's a template metaphor. It's truly happening, but we can use it as a metaphor for other ways of clearing, and that the heart, we don't need to figure it out. We just need to let it flow through us. And that in flowing through us, some things are going to be taken off that we don't need, and other energies, oxygens, ideas, whatever, are going to be added in. And as that circulates through, it changes who we are and the state of being that we're in. So to start with, just imagine your blood circulating around. It goes through the arteries. The arteries pump the blood out into the body, and the veins bring the blood back to the heart. So let's stay on the vein. Imagine you're burned out, you're depleted, you've got a chronic illness, or you feel like we're living in a time that is like a cultural chronic illness, and you feel like just giving up, you know, of just sitting still. But right now we're in a circulating mode. So let yourself be swept along with the blood, the venous blood that's coming back into the heart, and the atrium, the right atrium, welcomes it in. The right atrium doesn't say, I don't want the bad blood. It says, I'll accept the used up blood. Kind of like the Statue of Liberty, you know, we'll accept anybody from the world, come into this space. And the right atrium doesn't also hold on to this used up blood. It doesn't say, I'm a bad person, I deserve the bad blood. It lets it go to the right ventricle. And the right ventricle then pumps it out to its buddy, the lungs. The carbon dioxide is taken off out of the blood. oxygen is replenished, infused into the blood. And then the heart, the left atrium, receives the best, strongest, most oxygenated blood. And it doesn't say, oh, no, not me, give it to somebody else. It accepts the best, accepts the worst. It doesn't hold on to or reject it. And then the heart gives it away to the left ventricle. The left ventricle circulates it back out through the arteries to the body, replenishing the oxygen for all the work that the body's doing. So imagine with each breath, your heart is pumping, accepting the used up blood, reinfusing it, accepting the enriched blood, sending it out to the body. Body uses up the oxygen. Blood becomes filled with more carbon dioxide, comes back to the heart. The heart accepts it, gives it to the lungs give it back, goes back to the heart. The heart is replenished. After receiving the used up blood, it receives the richest blood, and it goes out to the body. So you've got this circulation roughly in a circle through your heart. The anatomy is a little bit weirder, but just imagine it's circulating in through your heart, going around and around, kind of like a hero or heroine's journey. And at some point in this circulation, maybe the circulation gets blocked up or something happens, something's not right. And you think, what is the center of gravity? What is the creative space within this circle where I can go for sanctuary to invite creativity and imagination into my life? So imagine in the center of these four ventricles and atria that there's a little tiny spot, a little black spot, and journey from your voyage in the circle around the outer part of the heart into this tiny little infinitesimal dot. And as you journey toward it, it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger until it's a cave, the size of a cave that you can enter into. And you walk into this cave. You walk into this darkness. You walk into this empty space. And it's so dark you can't even tell how big it is. You hear an echoing as you're walking. And maybe at some point it's so big it even absorbs the echo. And you just feel surrounded by a void of empty space. And find a spot there when you feel you've ventured in as far as you'd like. Sit down. You can sit in meditation pose. You can lie down. You can sit on a rock. Imagine whatever is there where you'll be comfortable for a while. And just like the incubation of the Asklepios, the healing centers founded on Asklepios, enter into a state of stillness. Hesychia or something like that. That word comes to mind. Chris, you'll tell me about that later, what that word is. But entering into this stillness, you're in a guhā, you're in the cave of your own heart. Small, tiny spot that when you enter in it is vast. And you need to go into the space. The greater the space, the larger the imagination and creativity that can come in. And you can imagine this as a sanctuary within your heart. Anytime you feel lost, you can come here through your imagination and creativity, and you can find imagination and creativity here. I'll leave some silence for a minute or two here. So part of the hero or heroine's journey is to go into the dark night of the soul, or to go into the darkness, to leave the daylight realm and go into the underworld, and to find some boon there. And it's often what brings us into the underworld is often things that we're not very happy about, like illness or war or personal distress or cultural stress, cultural collapse, even. Times where you feel that there's nothing to hold on to. Those are the times that you're often thrown into the darkness. And you can remember in the darkness, there's this space, this sanctuary of creativity and imagination, this guhā that you can enter into and just sit, stop running, stop trying to avoid, stop trying to solve a problem, stop trying to figure it out. Let the answers come to you. Listen to your dreams. Listen to your heart. But in the hero or heroine's journey, there's a time where you also have to leave this place, where you have to go back to the everyday world. So imagine now slowly standing up from however you are in this cave of the heart, starting to slowly walk out, knowing you can come back here at any time. It's always here. And walking away from it, where it becomes from a large cave, where you exit the cave and you keep walking, and it becomes smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and becomes a little infinitesimal dot. And you join back into the circulation of the heart, the blood flowing on its journey, going out enriched with oxygen, coming back with loads of carbon dioxide weighing it down, and then getting replenished in the lungs, transforming, going round and round. And slowly open your eyes and come back into the daylight world. And thank you for that journey, into a place that's a still point within you, and a point of vast emptiness, yet also vast potential. So, what would you like to say there, Chris?
Well, thank you first for that practice. And may both creativity and imagination lead us gently in their own way until the future that they imagine for us becomes possible.
Yes, thank you. Well, shall we end on that note?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll
Okay.
see you next month.
End of 2025. We'll see you in 2026.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.